Welcome to our GetKampus University podcast, where we bring you insightful conversations with inspiring individuals. Today, we are excited to have Matthew Chu, a student in the prestigious MIT Leader for Global Operations program, joining us to share his experience. Matthew's goal is to be the father of nuclear engineering in Singapore, and we will be talking about his journey to achieve that visions. He was my seniors at the National University of Singapore, where we both graduated from the engineering science program. After completing his master's in chemical engineering at NUS, he worked with Home Team Science and Technology in Singapore. Before we dive into the conversations, a quick shout out to our sponsors, only at the beginning, Get You Coffee. Check out the link in the descriptions to support our podcast and get your hands on some delicious Indonesian coffee. After this, there will be no sponsors or promotions to keep the conversation experience smooth. Without waiting, let us hear from Matthew Chu on his sharing about MIT LGO. How do you actually explain to them your North Star at the interview, and what's your motivations to go to MIT LGO?
Okay. Well, for me, the reason I chose MIT LGO is because the degree program is very practical in nature. You gain an MBA with a master's in engineering of your choosing. So I think there's 9 different departments that you can choose from mechanical to civil to aeronautical, nuclear, operations research. So these are all options for you to choose from. And so when you apply to a program like the LGO, you have to know which department you want. So it is not like your traditional MBA where you are allowed to say there is flexibility in a traditional MBA. You're applying it because why? You want to go to business school, you want to pivot to a different field, you want to try something different, or you want to advance your career. So there is all sorts of stories that you can craft for the MBA. For the LGO program, when you apply, you need to choose which engineering department you want. So you need to really have a general idea like, okay, this is the direction I'm going. And that's the department I'm applying for. And so that's the first thing you can know about this program, which means that inherently you really must have an idea of why you want to go there. You don't have to have exact details like, oh, I'm going to become an aerospace engineer for Boeing that can help them save the supply chain. I mean, that's very specific. It's good if you have it, but you don't need to that level. But you can say something generic like, oh, that we know that after COVID-19, the aerospace supply chain has been having challenges. So I really want to use my knowledge that I'm gained to go into the field to try and solve it. But you just don't know which area you want to work yet. You do not know the details. And then for me personally, my North Star has always been the same for many years. I have always wanted to do nuclear engineering in Singapore. I've always wanted engineering, not just energy, but nuclear engineering, which is an all-encompassing field, including nuclear energy. And wow. I used to joke with my friends that I have a vision. My goal is to be the father of nuclear energy in Singapore. It's a grand goal.
It's great. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, but the thing is, you see, whenever sometimes some friends will go, "Are you mad? Like it's never gonna work." But that's the thing. Visions are not meant to be realistic. Visions are meant to be something so crazy that you can work towards. And if you can make it work, good for you. If you can't, it's okay. It's a vision. It's meant to be your guiding star. And it may have started as a joke, but that became my guiding principle. Everything that I want to do in nuclear energy and nuclear engineering, can I bring it back to Singapore to make it work? And that is the reason why the LGO program became so attractive. Because when you learn an MBA, especially in a program called the Leader for Global Operations, you realize that there is a very key aspect of nuclear that we never talk about. Everyone talks about the technical safety. That's correct. Technical safety is one problem. But even without the system, let's say you want to build the industry without having the reactors in Singapore, you need to know how to manage the people. You need to know how to plan operations around it. You need to plan the supply chain. That is not just a technical thing. That is really an MBA aspect already.
Yes.
And again, it is not talking about building a reactor in Singapore. Even if you don't want to build a reactor in Singapore, but you just want to build a workforce so that we can protect ourselves, you still need to know how to manage people for that. So that is why the LGO program became a very attractive option for me. And that is how I crafted it. So when I was telling them during my interview, they said, why LGO? I was saying this. My vision is to be the father of nuclear energy in Singapore. I want to be the guy, when they look in the history books, they're going to say, Matthew built the nuclear industry in Singapore. But you can't do that if you're just a PhD. You have to be able to do it when you are You have to be able to understand how to manage the people. A PhD will always be very good at the technical details. That is a given. But it is not
right.
confirmed that you can manage people or plan operations. That's two separate monsters altogether. And
Mm,
so that is the reason
yeah.
why, that's how I saw myself. And the person asked and said, what happens if you don't make it? My answer was, it's a North Star. It's not always meant to be. Some people can succeed in it, some people can't. So I would say that that was the answer I gave to, people. And sorry about it. Because someone messaged me and I was like, yeah. So yeah, that was basically so that was, so what was I talking about? My apologies, because someone distracted me while walking
It's
by.
okay.
Okay.
Take your time.
Okay, I apologize. So I told them, I said, I was talking about failing of the vision. So I said, it's a vision. It's not meant to succeed. I do not know whether it will succeed, but it
Mhm.
is a vision I've set for myself. That is my North Star, and that is why I applied. And then what followed up was the question was like, what are the schools that you apply for? Because one of the important questions that they always ask is they want to make sure that you have options. They don't want to leave you dangling. And I will never forget the face of my interviewer because I told her, I applied for no other school. I applied only for one school, this place,
Wow.
and this program. I only have one. And when they asked me why, it went back to my North Star because MIT was doing work on something called microreactor, which is something that I really feel is going to be beneficial for Singapore in the long run. Not now, but in the long run. So I told them, I said, what was the point of me applying to another school if they don't have the work? It's pointless. I mean, I'm not coming to MIT to do a dual degree just for fun. There is a purpose behind my application. And so like that, based on that vision, why should I apply to Harvard? Why should I apply to Berkeley? I mean, they're good schools, but they're never going to give me what I want because it will never fulfill my vision, my North Star, my planning guiding principle. And I firmly believe that because of that, that is what made me stood out during the interview process compared to the rest of my folks. Because I can tell you, my classmates are smart. Like they're smart on a different scale. I don't even hold a candle to them. So I always like to say I didn't make it in clearly based on my smartness. I did on something else. But
Mm, yes.
jokes aside, they are really a great bunch. But all this comes into play because at the end of the day, the people who are applying with you are not dumb. These are the cream of the crop. You don't apply to a dual degree program in MIT if your grades are straight D's. I'm so sorry. I have to be upfront.
Mhm. Yes.
But if you have a decent grade, then what makes you stand out atop the pack is all these other things that come into play. Your ability to articulate around your North Star, the ability to craft a story when answering a question, or
Mm,
and answering the
yes.
most important, so what? Always most important question, so what? You're telling me this. What does this mean? Does it have any value to the story? So this is the important things of how to craft the skills to craft any application, not just to MIT, but to any school.
That's yeah, I think I noted down a lot. I definitely can learn the North Star that you mentioned from what you shared just now, right? I see that you have a
Mm,
very confident and very strong North Star. And I think if I want to take one key takeaway from this North Star is that
mm,
vision is not meant to be like, it's not meant to be realistic. Like it has to be like very, like it can be like a dream. Like if let's say
mm.
we fail, then it's okay, then we can try again. But if we succeed, then it's very great, right? Then
Of course,
I
you're right.
really agree that it sky's the limit, and I see that in you. Yeah, and
Yep.
when you
I,
mentioned, yeah.
I
uh,
think the key thing to remember is this. When you come up with a vision, don't worry that it doesn't make it needs to also make sense. Like don't tell
yes.
me you're gonna I mean when you come up with a vision, I'm going to live on Mars. I
Mm,
mean that's a bit ridiculous. But
yes.
you can have a vision like I see a vision. Let me give you a good example of a vision that is somewhat crazy, probably won't work, but it's still something worth doing. So Blue Origin is a good example.
Blue
Blue
Origin.
Origin's vision, they see a vision. They basically, when I went to visit the company as part of my program, I had a chat. They basically said our vision is that we see people working in space, like literally just to commit to space, like they're committing to work. That's their vision. Does that make sense? No. But the vision is meant to not the vision is meant to be so ambitious that you're going, what? So that is a vision, and that is a good one. I don't whether or not it makes sense. Let's worry about that. But when you start planning around that, then for them they go, okay, if I want people to commute to space as if it's normal, then my cost needs to go down. So you see, they created an insane vision, but there are tangible benefits that come from it. Another example that's closer to home for many of us in Singapore is look at Singapore today. When we became a country in 1965, our leaders said, this is what Singapore is going to be. How many of us actually believe that we are going to make it? Not many. I mean, I would hazard the guess to say not many really believed it. Like they put their trust in Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, but
Yes.
how many of them really said we will make it? He was one of the few that said we will do it, and then he worked towards it. And I would say that's why he's admired globally. He's one of the few people on earth who made a vision that was so unrealistic, but it was a vision, and he made it work. And
Mm,
so that's the key takeaway for I would say to share with everybody is this: it's okay for it to be unrealistic, but make sure it makes sense.
okay.
Don't make a vision that doesn't make sense. Yeah, but
Makes
it's okay
sense,
to be
right?
unrealistic. Yes.
Yes. I agree with you. I think I read in the books called Psychology of Money, and they are saying that you don't need to be rational, but at least you have to be reasonable. So in this case is, yeah, make that maybe unrealistic, but still have a make sense. And I
Mm.
think next is that you were saying we have to work for that visions, right? Yeah. So
Yes.
maybe to jump to the next questions, right? After
Sure.
the interview, maybe um before the interview you have to submit like GRE, right? Something like GRE.
Yes. Yeah, correct. So
Yeah.
I was lucky. I applied during 2021, where there was still no GRE or GMAT requirements. I had full waiver. Um, so the good news for MIT is that the MBA program at MIT doesn't require it to be specifically GMAT. Some other schools do. Whereas